Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Cults to Consciousness. My name is Shalise Ansola, your host, and today we are bringing back a very popular person. I was excited to talk to her about Seventh-Day Adventism, and we're diving into her marriage, which we didn't get to in her full interview, more about some of the threats she received, some of the religious-based conversion therapy that was also a threat to her, and how she was able to actually escape, deprogram, and of course we want to answer your questions too, so drop them in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, Rosei Quartz.
Hello. Thank you for having me back. I'm very excited to be here, talk more about cult things.
Yes, everybody loved your video. We had so many positive
Aww.
comments. Of course, everyone is just excited too about covering SDA because we haven't yet. I think you're the third or fourth video, maybe the fourth. And so we're looking to cover it more. So if anyone has a story, feel free to fill out that jot form in our About section. The link is there. But we're here to talk about you today. So let's just give a brief overview. If anyone wants to do a deep dive into your story, they can, of course, go listen to the full interview, but we don't want to deter anyone from watching this one if they haven't seen it yet. So let's just give a brief overview of your story, and then we'll get into the marriage part.
All right, so hi to those who didn't catch my introduction before. I was born and raised, baptized, educated, and married back into the Seventh-Day Adventist organization. This was a foundational part of my entire life, the way that I thought, the way that I ate, the way that I dressed for over 2 decades of my life. And I ended up having a major deconstruction. There was that experience of being like a pastor's kid. Of course, like when my dad became a pastor, and then I had that experience of becoming like a living commercial for the Seventh-Day Adventist Church and for my dad's platform. And that was just like a very distressing experience into watching my mom's health deteriorate within a health-based organization into her untimely passing. Then into like also being married, like pastor's kid to another pastor's kid, and the way that all fell apart. And I essentially had like this experience of like generational trauma, religious trauma, into discovering psychology, studying it at a post-secondary level, into also exploring other avenues such as makeup and cosplay, things like that, as a form of healing from religious trauma and purity culture and all that. So there's a whole bunch of lore, sorry, to unpack with me.
Yeah, there was so much to talk about, even when I was texting you about what should we zoom in on for the live. And you were giving me so much gold. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with this. Yeah, but I know there were a lot of people in the comments that felt that we didn't get the full ending to your story, and maybe it's because we did spend a lot of time in your childhood and early teen years. So I thought that would be a good place to start. And then, of course, if any of the other stuff comes up, like the private schools or the cry nights, we can get into that. And when she goes, we could talk about cry nights, I was like, what is that? So stay tuned.
Man.
Maybe we'll get there.
Like, you don't know what cry night is?
I know. You're like, what? So thank you guys for watching live. If you're here joining us, we appreciate you jumping on, leaving those comments in the comment section in the live chat. Jonathan will be starring them. We'll be answering your questions here in about 5-10 minutes. So drop those in. Okay, so let's dive into your marriage then. So you were already kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out of the church, and then you decided to marry someone who was in the church. So let's talk about, was there a rug pull moment where maybe he wasn't very active, or he claimed he wasn't, but then once you got married, it was like, no, you will be an Adventist housewife?
So the funny thing was about all of that is that my perspective was initially at the time when I left Adventism, I decided this is not for me. This isn't healthy for me. I was of the perspective that I could maintain a relationship with like another Adventist, somebody who was raised that way, as long as they respected my boundaries. Like I'd spent quite a bit of time by that point within psychology classes and those courses and learning that language, like how to advocate for yourself. And so my thought process was like, I'll respect your beliefs as long as you respect. I'm not going back to church. And also, like, I don't really want kids. I grown up in a long list of trad wives, and I was like, I don't really want to be a trad wife. So the discussion that I had with that ex-partner back right before we got married, what I did agree to was getting married, because that's what you did. You protected your parents' reputation because you were made to feel very strongly that how you behaved impacted your parents' paycheck. So there was no option to just move in together. Not on the table for us. So I was like, okay, we can get married. I feel like that's not the ideal choice. It's not what I would choose for me, but fine. We'll get married, and my conditions are I will not be coming back to church. I will not be having kids with you. So we get married and we move to the same city as his parents. And immediately within the first week that I'm there, it's, oh, you need to come to church because this event is happening. And it's important you come to the family. And I kept getting subjected to family discussions. It didn't matter how much I said, no, this is the boundary. This is the line. I kept being like, when you guys have kids and all this stuff. And so at some point into that marriage, I end up having like a full sobbing breakdown. I'm just like, what is happening? I feel like I'm in an alternate reality. Because when I had that conversation, I said, these are my two hard lines. They agreed. And they were like, okay, I hear you. I will respect this. And so I'm having a breakdown. I was like, what gives? You told me you respected these two hard lines. And they were like, well, I thought you'd change.
No. So it was all just an act to get you in the door, to get you married. How old were you?
At that time, I was 24 when we got married.
Okay, so that's still young.
Yeah, well, the thing is, my mom told me that she would, like, her words, I will kill you if you marry young, because she got married at 19, and my grandmother got married younger, grandmother even younger. So I thought 24 was waiting.
Okay, can I tell you something real quick? I thought the same thing when I was Mormon. I was like, guys, I'm not going to be one of those getting married at 19. I'm going to wait till I'm 24, thinking that was insane. And then I got to 24 and I was like, yeah, that doesn't feel right. Spoiler alert, I got married when I was 32. I'm like, what? That's insane. But I 100% get that mentality of you're like, oh, I'm so old now. I'm
so mature. My brain's developed.
Yeah.
My gosh, yeah. So basically what I found out was that the plan was to just negate that entirely. Just finding out I was not being taken seriously at all. And so I was very unimpressed about finding that out, or I was like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah, that's heartbreaking too, realizing that they just didn't respect you at all. And I feel like, at least within Mormonism, there's kind of okay, let me back up here. When I thought I was going to get married at 19, before I was like, I'm going to wait. The guy ended up confessing to me after we broke up like a year later. He's like, yeah, I know you had all these dreams, but my goal was to just make you a housewife. And I was like, bullet dodged. So I know that feeling of when you're like, really? You truly did not care who I was as a person, what I wanted to achieve or accomplish or become. It was just all about fitting myself into your agenda, into whatever it is you wanted me to be. And by the time you're there, you don't really have a choice in the matter because you're married and you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's that realization of finding out, because at least for me at this point, I have like walked down the aisle. And so you find out that the person who promised to love, honor, and cherish you is not treating you like a full person. They're not respecting your voice. They're not respecting your autonomy. And they've had this idea of where your life was going to go for you. And you're just like, what?
So, right now I remember where I was going with that. I was like, I feel like I had a point. My point was to ask you, is it common in Adventism to treat the woman like that or to have really intense gender roles? And maybe they're not so overt about it, but everyone kind of knows the rules under the
Mm.
surface.
Oh, it is overt. Adventism has dietary plans, lifestyle plans, and marriage plans. And if I'm remembering his name correctly, it's Bill Gothard.
Yeah, Bill Gothard.
He intersected into Adventism around the time of the Duggars and whatnot. So from what I understand, the other person you interviewed, Melissa, I was seeing her talk about this. Bill Gothard ended up doing lectures and stuff like that at Adventist universities like Loma Linda, and yes, Adventism has been patriarchal since its inception. It's always been like women submit. But what Bill Gothard brought in the umbrella model, where it was like it's supposed to be God, husband, wife, kids, and then the other set of umbrellas like Satan, wife, husband, kids.
Yeah.
Like, heaven forbid you have a little crumb of authority in your relationship as a woman. But yes, it is patriarchal, very blatantly so. It is, you are supposed to submit. You're supposed to make yourself smaller. Even though you have your own brain, you need to condense it down. You have to have a meek, quiet, gentle soul is what they're going for.
Yeah, I feel like this is also a good point because that just reminded me to mention how, because it is such a huge worldwide church in so many different places, there are going to be people who practice it differently or aren't totally indoctrinated to the standards that other people are. The reason I thought of it, someone mentioned, well, I was in SDA and I never followed Bill Gothard, or I got an education and I'm a woman. And so I just want to hear from your perspective that little disclaimer.
Yes. So the reason that you're going to find such a wide spectrum of indoctrination across Adventism is because, like, if you typically think of a cult, right? The trope of a cult, it's maybe 40 members. It's easy to maintain indoctrination over a small group of people. You have more time and energy and resources to keep on top of what people's brains and behavior are doing. But when you go across the board into millions of people, you don't have the resources to indoctrinate at that level. So what happens within a high demand organization like Adventism is you have the true Adventists and you have the Badventists. Badventist was a term that came from like a comedy YouTube video where you've got like the Adventist who drinks coffee. They're a Badventist. The Adventist that wears jewelry. They're a Badventist. And so part of the reason you see such a wide spectrum is because you cannot reasonably, if you're like a cult organization or like what I call like a culture, if you're trying to, the whole point is to pull in tithe money. Ultimately, like that's the goal, is to get as much tithe money as possible. So it doesn't matter if people are not quite at like a level of full indoctrination, as long as they're tithing, they're showing up to some degree. But you typically see the most intense levels of indoctrination where the Adventist Conference has put down its roots, which is usually around their universities. So you're looking at Burman in Canada. Adventism's been losing money over the years. Like they've been closing school after school after school. So you typically find that Adventism is more like intense around Loma Linda, Andrews, Walla Walla. And it's also going to be like certain areas. You'll typically find Adventists are more intense where the geographic location is more depressing. So prairie Adventists tend to be a little bit more dour, a little bit more like, is God coming yet or not? Versus like somebody who's in a warmer climate, like Loma Linda's in California. So you typically find that somebody might be more easygoing if like they're warmer, they might have a little bit more money, versus somebody who's like in a more intense climate, There's a bunch of different factors that go into indoctrination and the levels that you'll see. So everybody's got a different experience and a different story with a large group like Adventism. The stories are going to be a little bit more varied.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was
Yeah.
cracking up at the Badventist thing because our version was Jack Mormon. So if you drink coffee or drink alcohol every now and then, you're a Jack Mormon.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. You got like
But you're still Mormon.
Mhm. Yeah, I think every group like that's probably got like a little like cheeky nod at the people who aren't quite at the level they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you could just call it Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Just kidding. Whole different topic for another day. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions in the chat before we continue with our story here. Within Shiny Happy People, they said each family was their only cult. Does that sound similar to SDA?
Yes, I was sitting there glued to my seat for Shiny Happy People because I was like, wow, this is Adventists did not go full hardcore for the quiverful movement per se. So you don't necessarily see like massive, large Adventist families, but the whole each household is its own cult does ring true to my experience with Adventism because, like, when on the day that I got married, my new stepmother came up to me in at one point in after I think it was like after the ceremony or something like that. And she comes up to me and she goes, don't worry. And she's very earnest. And she goes, he might be the head, but you're still the neck. And I was like,
what?
Ma'am.
The neck?
I'm
wow.
the neck.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I like okay, and that's meant in like I said, full earnestness. You are under the headship. So when they say
You're
like
there to
it
hold
is,
'em up.
yeah, you are the support system for this. And I was like, okay, it's not like I don't have my own brain, but awesome, great.
Yeah. That was on your wedding day. Was that one of the first clues where you were like, oh shit, what did I do?
Well, the thing is, that whole day was kind of weird because I'm downstairs. You know, weddings typically go, everyone like they gather upstairs as the bride is in a different area getting ready to be marched out. I find out while I'm down there waiting that my ex-father-in-law is upstairs telling people, like he's entertaining people with the story of a Christian couple who have just gotten married and they're getting ready to go to the marriage bed. But before they copulate, they kneel before the bed together and they ask God to cast out any bad influences that might be surrounding their new marriage bed. And in this story, they open their eyes and demons are fleeing the bedchamber. And I'm like, I'm hearing about this happening, and I was just like, wow. Like that's how
You're
the
like,
day
what do I do with this?
that's how the day started.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Did you have to pray before you consummated the marriage?
So by that point, the funny thing was like the person that I married was also a bit of a Badventist. So they're still attending church, but they did drink and whatnot. So after we finished the reception, we got into the limo to go to the hotel, and there was a free bottle of champagne, and we ended up chugging it. That we had to do that ceremony, the reception, sober. Adventist weddings are a completely sober event. And so we end up, so we get in the car and just chug the champagne and get to the hotel. And yeah, I actually think I probably would have just like him on the spot if he suggested praying over this.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see if there are any other questions before we continue. Okay, with the neck,
Mm.
they mean that you do everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were expected to do everything in the house like a trad wife would be expected?
Well, that was when, like, my expectation was I would go through with the ceremony and then our families would leave us alone. I was just like, I thought this was a tit for tat type of or deal where we would do the thing, we would show up, we give their congregations a show, and then it would be back to normal life. And then while we were married, I started noticing weird things happening where I was starting to be asked to stop what I was doing to do something else for them. I'd be fully in the middle of something else, and then they'd be like, I want you to get me water. I want you to go vacuum this. It'd be like it was stuff where I was like, what? I am fully busy and you're not doing anything. And then the way that I'd be treated for not reacting and not serving them was like disappointment, kind of giving me the silence, like just very aggravated energy at me. And I was like, who are you? Since when?
Yeah.
What is happening? Yeah. And that kind of became clear that was the expectation.
Wait, did I miss the part? Did you say that you were living with them?
Yeah, so once we got married, we moved in together to like this duplex apartment where that was, like I said, we weren't allowed to move in together or live together like common law or anything like that beforehand. So we were students at one of the private Adventist universities. And as soon as like graduation happened, it was boom, married, so we could move in together. And that's what you do at Adventist universities, is especially for women. It's always funny to me where they're like, "Oh, well, I went and got an education." I'm like, "Did you go to a secular one, or were you at the I'm here to get a husband university experience?"
This is so much like Mormonism. I can't. Everything that you're saying. I went to BYU to get the Mrs. degree, the MRS degree.
The Mrs. degree. Yes, it's exactly what they call it, because that's what you do. As soon as you're done, you're like, "Oh, we're not allowed to have sex, so we're going to get married now."
Yeah.
And move in together and marry so that we can do normal human things.
Yep. It's all the same. Wow. It's blowing my mind right now. Okay. Any other questions before we continue? I just noticed you were live. Rosei Quartz is one of my all-time favorite people on social media, says Jay.
Aww.
Has anyone listened to the Dark History episode on Kellogg? Oh my gosh. So we talked about that, and so many people in the comments were like, I had no idea. Do you want to give a little synopsis of the Kellogg thing for people who don't know?
So Kellogg was groomed for service to the Seventh-Day Adventist Church by the prophetess of the Adventist Church, Ellen G. White. And she encouraged him to go into the medical field because according to her visions, health was one of like the three angels' message type of things. Like this was supposed to be Adventism's special thing, was health. So she ends up encouraging him to go this route. And he is riding along with the theories of the time about purity culture. He was a weird dude across the board. Like I talked about in the other episode, the yogurt in certain places you probably shouldn't put yogurts. He had the whole idea for cereal to stop kids from touching themselves, and he also had weird ideas about eugenics and training up kids. He was not having intercourse with his wife, but he was adopting various children of color to test his theories of purifying other people groups. Oh. So he was... yeah, there's a lot happening with him that we could dive into, and the Dark History episode on him is a good one. There's another podcast, I don't remember the name of it. They covered Kellogg and Ellen G. White as well. It's like it has a word bastards in it. And somebody in the audience will probably know what I'm talking about. But they cover him and Ellen White pretty well. I heard it a few years back, so I don't remember the name of the podcast.
Yeah. So if you thought cornflakes were boring, it's for a reason.
It's for specific reasons.
Food.
Bland food keeps you from touching yourself.
keeps you, yeah. What? Anyways, oh my gosh, I just put 2 and 2 together. You probably have way before I have, but now you are a spice merchant. You're all the spice.
Yes, that's
Because spices weren't allowed in Adventism, and now you're a spice merchant. We'll get into more of that if people don't know what that means.
No, so
but I love that.
Yeah, it's the Adventism kind of they went from like very intense on this in the 1800s to a little bit more lax today. Depending on who's doing the cooking. You'll have some families be a little bit more liberal with spice. However, you will notice that especially ethnic families who are cooking with meat and they're cooking with a lot more spices, they're more on the Badventist side of things. So I did not develop a spice palate. Even to this day, I have a very hard time with spicy food because I did not grow up with it. It was very rare. Like my dad really liked spicy food, but that was something that it didn't show up a lot for us in our diet.
Yeah. Melissa's interview, she said she went as far as to say no salt or pepper even, and her family was allowed because of Ellen G. White's teachings.
Yeah, Ellen White, and I'm pretty sure this is because Ellen White did suffer a massive head injury. She was having blackouts, she was having seizures, and so part of her whole thing with health and diet was the theory that no salt, no butter, no meat, like basically the blandest diet possible was what would stop her from having any kind of like seizure or whatnot. And of course, like this is way back when, so we really don't know exactly what was causing what, but to some degree they were projecting what was helpful for her onto everybody and making her dietary needs and everybody's problem. And they're just like, let's package this and sell it to everybody.
Yeah, as doctrine.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? And then I keep saying that, and then we'll move on. Okay, maybe we'll take a break from. Okay, so let's go back to your marriage then. So, how long was it before you realized I cannot stay in this if I want to survive?
So we ended up. We spent like I was married for about 2 years, and we had gone from the Adventist university to a secular university to continue. I was working part-time, like I was doing school part-time and working full-time as a personal support worker and absolutely burning out. My ex-partner was not working, and I was carrying the whole, the majority of like the responsibility for us staying afloat. So I was burning out, and the atmosphere around me was getting so much more passive aggressive. And then Ford cut the student funding in Ontario a couple of years ago. We couldn't afford to keep going. And I was like, hey, why don't we move back to Alberta? Because maybe we could get like work out there. Maybe like it sucks we have to end this program here for school, but I can't keep holding us up financially. So they go and apply for work out in Alberta, do manage to get it. So we end up moving back to Alberta right as the pandemic hit. So I end up being trapped at home, no longer the breadwinner because we've moved, they're now employed, I'm not. And that's when things start getting more intense. And when they were in Alberta, it's actually social media to some degree that I have to thank for this moment because I was so lonely at that point. I had moved away from all of my friends. I moved away from a job that I really enjoyed into an environment where all of my boundaries are being crossed. I'm now exhausted by the work that I'm doing. And when they went out to Alberta to look for work ahead of me for a few months, I started making TikToks. That was when like it first started. And it was just, I'd started getting lightly into more like witchy pagan stuff because it's affirming. Though that line of spiritual thought is a lot more affirming for women. And so I'd started exploring that at that point. His family was not pleased about it. But at that point, I'd gone full brat mode. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do what I want to do. So the experience I had was basically me starting to make little TikToks showing my new tarot cards or things like that. And I started building connections and making friends online in communities outside of this Adventist world that I've been pulled into. And it was so affirming and fun. And I was getting affirmation from an external audience where I was like, wow, I'm being supported in a way that people who actually know and claim to care about me are. That is wild. But at the time, I thought it was going to be temporary. My mental health was absolutely shot at that point. And to some degree, like they were, him and his family have no idea that I was about like this close to giving in and just reverting back and going autopilot, just because it was like, you know what? There's nothing to live for, apparently. Like, there's nothing happy here. Might as well just cognitively shut down and autopilot for however long, I guess. And so my plan was to do these TikToks for a while. I started doing like a little bit of cosplay in there, started doing a little bit more makeup. And then I was going to go out to Alberta. And at some point while out there, just shut off my accounts, go dark on that, and then just go along with the trad wife thing and whatever else. And then I couldn't do it. I moved out to Alberta, and there was one night where I was sitting there on the couch with my phone, and I was like, okay, we're going to give this up. We're done. And I couldn't make myself deactivate my account. And there was like this stubbornness that was happening with me where I was like, you know what? Actually, no. You know what? I don't want to stop doing this. And eventually that continued external affirmation I was getting from my audience, like I started sharing more and more about the experience I was having, sharing more about Adventism, and I started getting a community built around me, like people telling me that they liked me. They liked me as I was. They didn't want a changed trad wife version of me. They wanted me. And it was almost like following oxygen at that point. It was like being in an oxygen-starved environment, and then fresh air is blowing in from somewhere, and you just like, you have to follow it. Like you're absolutely starving for it. And yeah, at some point it was like, no, I'm not actually going to give in. I absolutely can't do it.
Yeah. And so then you tell him, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. His parents go ballistic, calling you a witch and calling you're putting hexes.
Not exactly. So like they never went ballistic. What happened was, at this time, before getting married, his dad starts telling us that he wants us to do marriage counseling, either with him or with my dad. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Neither of you is a licensed therapist, for one thing. And even if you were, you're not allowed to give counseling services to family. This is violating all the ethical boundaries. And also, this is very personal information. I don't want your dad or my dad to be I don't want you guys digging around in my personal stuff. That's weird. And so that was another thing that they were very aggravated with me about, was I set that boundary and I held it. But after we went back out to Alberta, and I saw somebody ask, could your in-laws not help you? The condition on that, they helped us move, but the other option was to move in with them. And I absolutely refused to move in with his family, because it was, if you're under our house, it's our rules. And I was like, oh no, I'll be in hell. Like this, that means that every chance of a boundary I could possibly have will be demolished. I will not have a voice. I will not have any say-so. His dad will dictate how my life goes. And I was like, absolutely not. Can't do it. And so we get out to Alberta, And through TikTok, like there's two things that happened congruently. One of them was through TikTok, I ended up seeing content from, it's like TikTok is divided into like, you've got witch talk, you've got book talk, you've got kink talk, you've got truck talk, like nurse talk, like everybody gets sorted into these different algorithms. And I ended up crossing kink talk. Like one of the reasons my platform today is so heavy on things like deconstructing sexuality or things you might be into and whatnot is specifically because that content is what led me to finding out my legal rights in marriage. It was Kink Talk that was talking about how I legally can reverse consent. I can, because I was raised to believe once you're married, they could have full access to your body. Your husband owns your body. And it doesn't matter if you're in pain. It doesn't matter this, that, and the other. And it also doesn't matter if you're asleep. And so that was my, the content that I scrolled into on TikTok was the first time I came across information about my legal rights. And I was like, I don't have to be here. If this is happening, I don't have to be here. There's a door. And then also, his dad starts sending that marriage counseling program to us through email. And I have about 12 emails or so of just pages and pages of this stuff, asking for personal information, asking us to go over it, and then do Zoom calls with them. And just once again, violating that boundary that I had set. And so I've basically got to the point where not only are my boundaries being overstepped in regards to interpersonal physical activity, but also like I said no to this, and it makes you feel like you're losing your mind. You'll give a very factual statement. You are family. You can't give counseling. Ethically, this is a boundary you don't get to cross. And then you have multiple grown adults trying to cross a universally accepted ethical boundary, and you're just like, am I having a stroke?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So basically, there ends up being this moment where I am confronting my ex, and I'm like, I said no to your parents sending this stuff, and the content of that, like there's, if you want a hilarious story about one of those letters too.
Yeah, tell me.
So in one of those letters, they're talking about traditional roles in the home. And of course, it's all very, you can't have a brain if you're the woman. And he's talking about how, like, in my ex-father-in-law's, like, in his own marriage to his wife, how he would go to work, come home, and find out his wife had tried to hang a picture. And she had tried, for some reason, using a rock to nail the nail in the wall. And he goes, this made him feel emasculated. He doesn't want her doing that. And she needs to step back and respect his role in the home. And I'm reading this like, couldn't you just show her where the toolbox
Yikes.
is? What? And like, I'm reading this as somebody, like, my first job was doing farmyard work. I was driving a combine at like 16. So you're telling somebody who has driven heavy machinery that I'm not allowed to just nail a nail in the wall?
Yeah.
No, like I'm not incompetent. Why on earth? And why on earth is his ego so small? Like, anybody, any Christian man, where I'm like, if you need me to pretend to be incompetent, how is your ego? Like, is it like this big?
Yeah, somehow it's offensive to him if you do something yourself.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It was absolutely wild. So I get about 12 emails in, and I've had it. And I talked to my ex, and I'm like, hey, I don't feel safe. I do not feel safe with your family if they're going to continue ignoring when I say no. And what happened was a balled up fist and the statement, I want to hit you for that. that makes me want to hit you. And I was like, you're going to, like, to myself, like at that moment, that was the moment where I was like, I'm leaving. Because like I'd heard so many stories of women in domestic violence situations where they talk about how before she actually gets hit, there will be like physical things like that. They'll do this first, and then it will be a wall. Then it might be a small animal or a pet or something like that, and then it'll be you. And when I saw the gesture, and I was like, da-da-da, I'm dead. Like, this is not going to end well for me if I stay here. This isn't going to go well for me. And so between realizing, oh, things shouldn't be happening to me when I'm not conscious for them, and then also seeing that was the moment where I was like, I have to go. And fortunately, I had a friend working in the oil field in Alberta and BC where they would be gone for weeks at a time. And so I asked them if I could just crash at their apartment. And they allowed me to do that. And I ended up going over to that apartment more and more and more during like the pandemic. Nobody's there. And then after the fist was raised at me, I ended up going there and not coming back. That was the, like, there was an end point. The claims that I was hexing and cursing happened around the time where I'm separating. And so I go over there with a friend to get some of my stuff, and my friend gets pulled aside for a while. She comes back to me and she's like, I just got told that you hexed somebody to death. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, apparently you do blood magic. And I was like,
who pulled her aside? Your ex?
My ex, yeah. And so apparently the story that was being conveyed to our families was I was like a witch. I was leaving to become a witch on social media, that I was hexing people. We had like a neighbor pass away at some point. Like there was a tiff, like some very tragic happened there. But apparently that was my fault now, over a year later, kind of thing. Like, it was the neighbor was my fault. I ended up meeting one of their coworkers because when we moved and they got employed, I met and they were like, "Oh, you're Rosie. You're this person's ex." And I was like, "Yeah. How did you know?" And they're like, "Well, can I tell you what they said about you?" And I was like, "Oh God, this is great." And they're like, "Yeah, apparently you hexed them with COVID."
Oh, jeez.
And I was I hexed a frontline worker.
Yeah.
With the same thing that everybody is getting right now. Like, and I was a little bit insulted because I'm like, if you're going to develop a reputation for hexing people, you want it to be a little bit more elaborate than that. Like, you want to be a little bit more creative.
Not a basic witch.
Exactly. I'm like, if I hex you, you're going to know it was me.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was basically the story that was happening at the time. Was I was a witch and was hexing and things like that. But actually at the time what was going on, while they're claiming I'm hexing, I'm completely broke in order to leave. So I am at my friend's place alone, basically eating one meal every 3 days. And then filming some TikToks and stuff. And then, because Patreon became my first form of income outside of this situation and then into spice merchantry. So I had to go through a period of food insecurity. And that was just the funniest thing to me, where like on one hand, you've got, she's a witch, she's hexing people, cut to me like on a bed, starving, not doing anything because I'm conserving energy. And it's like the dramaticness of it all versus the reality of that. Yeah.
Well, they have to have someone to blame because it couldn't possibly be their son who was the problem.
Not once, not ever. No.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's the thing to me is I'm like, it didn't have to go that way. That's not how things need to happen. And one of my biggest frustrations with Adventism and whatnot is that, like, you're watching people cross very basic common sense ethical boundaries instead of actually checking in directly, instead of following through with very common sense things. It turns into this whole thing about spiritual warfare. And I think that's what was like the weird thing to me. I was like, I need food, I need security, I need safety. And what's actually happening is spiritual warfare. And that's so inappropriate.
Well, I feel like it's common in these churches where that is their tool of control. Because if you think about it, those type of churches, they keep the masses controlled and contributing money by dangling salvation and by saying you're going to go to hell if you don't do these things. And there's basically these empty promises, and that's how they keep them doing what they want. And so that's kind of all they know, right? Instead of actually having a conversation of, can we get to the bottom of what's going on? They're just going to use the same tactics that that has been used on them and try to get you in the same way. That's not useful at all. It's not helpful. And it's just, I mean, it's pointless. So before we get into more of the threats, because I know more are coming, let's answer a few more questions. Nathan says, as someone who's currently had COVID, I wonder what witch I pissed off.
An Etsy witch.
Oh, no.
It's got to be Etsy.
Brenda says, as a 60-year-old woman, I have had that I'm having a stroke moment in relationship. Really felt that and made me laugh. Oh, am I having a stroke moment? Yes. Jeanette says, why is it that in all these cults, women have no voice? We are in 2025 because they're all run by men and they don't want to give away any ounce of their power. They just want to keep us small because I think they know that if they give women a voice, they will rise up in power. I mean, women are incredible and can do incredible things, and they're just not willing to step aside for half a second.
Well, that was I had the wildest moment where my ex-father-in-law deadass says to me that very thing. Like, he has this moment where he turns to me and he goes, I believe women should actually be in charge. Like, that was, I once again, feeling like you're having a stroke. And he was like, yeah, I do think women should be more in charge of things, but I am afraid of what it'll actually look like if women are given this agency and this authority. And I'm looking at him like,
wow.
The self-awareness is there at least, but could we have the follow through?
Exactly.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, I guess it's a weird thing because I'm not going to deny that women and men do have certain strengths, biologically speaking. I think that, yeah, sure, we may have different things that we're better at than each other, but at the same time, that doesn't make one better or less than, because I feel like to truly thrive as a species, we need that equality. We need to understand that maybe your talents are different here, but also there are so many gender roles that have been placed on us that aren't necessarily true, right? Like women in leadership. Women are amazing leaders. If you look at how traditionally they have been the tradwives, even just taking care of the household. Do you know how much it takes to run a household? Like how much preparation, organization, control, leadership over your children? Like it really does take a lot of skills. And so it's silly to think that women couldn't do that in the outside world and run big organizations, because we've seen the evidence. We know that they can. And so sure, maybe we may be more biologically nurturing, but that doesn't mean we're not capable of doing these other things that men are capable of doing as well. So yeah, I mean, it's annoying. Anyways, I'm going to go off on a tangent. Let's go back to the questions. Okay, Darlene says, if they give a woman a voice, she might set up a YouTube channel and call them out. Exactly. Pamela says, Rosie, have you read the book by Steve Daly, Ellen G. White, Psychobibliography? Oh, Pamela, are you the one that emailed me? Someone emailed me that exact book.
I have not, but that sounds like something I do need to get my hands on
Yeah,
for
sounds right up your
sure.
alley. If you're interested in looking back
Mhm.
into it. I know sometimes after you leave and find out all the stuff about your religion, it's like, do I want to keep diving into this more, or am I ready to set it aside for a minute? Okay, Andy says 1 in 20 Adventists in the pews won't make it to heaven according to Ellen White. Really? There is no salvation in Adventism. Okay, is that something that I've been missing? Is that a missing piece that I had
Um,
wrong?
well, that's kind of like the weird thing about Adventism is they do have stuff. They give like a psychological intensity to the salvation aspect. There is one verse in, I think it's Revelation, that talks about how there's going to be 100, is it 140,000 people? Like it's a very relatively small
144,000.
yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses have the same.
Yeah, so it's basically um this whole thing where the prophetess is saying most people won't make it, and then also there's only going to be this relatively small portion of people who survive the plagues and the being hunted by the government and all this stuff. So Jesus is going to have a relatively small amount of people to come back. And like when people talk about how their experience with Adventism is that it wasn't that intense, I find that they usually come from an Adventist church where Ellen White specifically was not as intensely focused on. The churches where Ellen White is more of a core basis of it, like it goes hand in hand with the theology, you're going to find it gets more intense. So there'll be a lot more like, you need to get with it, you need to have your life in order, you need to be following all this stuff, because like it's a small window here.
Yeah, so if salvation isn't the thing that is motivating people to be good, is it just the fear of damnation?
Oh yeah, the core basis of Adventism is that Jesus is coming back. The whole thing is basically we're inherently cursed, and our experience here on this earth is a bad one. And like one of the main reasons I can't be Adventist anymore is because I actually do want to be here. I I don't have this sense of like, please God, take me away from this. There's no part of me that has this need for like, oh my God, I hate life, I hate this planet, I hate the people in it, Jesus, please take me to heaven kind of mentality going on with me. But you'll typically find if you sit down for an Adventist service, the whole thing is basically we're coming together, and what brings us together is this desire for Jesus to come get us. We don't really want to be
Mm,
here anymore. We're waiting for the end times. We're not getting attached to anything here. And so that the pressure, the more invested you are emotionally in salvation, the more intensely you buy into the indoctrination.
yeah. Well, is it just me, or doesn't that say a lot about the church itself if everyone is miserable and doesn't want to be there anymore?
Yeah, I remember very specifically the being confused as a kid, because I would hear over and over they would talk about how Jesus fills a hole in your heart. I had no idea what they were talking about. They were like, Jesus relieves your anxiety, Jesus relieves these feelings. And then it wasn't until I started studying to become like either a counselor or a therapist that I was like, oh, those are symptoms. You guys are talking about literal mental health symptoms. And instead of sending people to a therapist, you're saying Jesus is the solution to your mental health symptoms, right? So chronic loneliness, depression, anxiety, maybe even a serious, like a disorder, right? You've got people who are seeking relief, and that's who they're targeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, any more questions before we move on? Oh, yes. Cool. Thanks, Pamela.
Mm.
Thanks for reaching out. Janet, Shalise, and Rosie, you are my favorite women together. You
Aw.
rock. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you,
Yes.
Janet.
So fun. Love talking to Rosie. I was just telling her off camera, I was like, I feel like we look like we could be sisters. You guys tell me what you think, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like the darker look, but I was like, no, we got the same
Yeah.
Anyways, any other questions before we get into the rest of the story here? Just want to say, love you, Rosie. One of my favorite creators. You've inspired me so much. Oh, that's so
Thank you.
nice. So nice.
Aw.
Okay. So, one more. Carrie, from my personal experience, I can very much see how this sadly was allowed to happen to you. Thank you for sharing that, Carrie. Yeah. So the last part of the story, which is, I think, the biggest part of like, oh my gosh, what? I got to get out of here, is him threatening to disappear you. So when did that happen? And let's talk about that.
Yeah. So as I was doing this pattern, basically, like before I fully separated, I would go to my friend's place for a couple of days at a time just to get space from that environment and just how intense it was starting to feel. And because like I was also picking up on they seemed to resent my social media presence. Like there were weird little things that were happening that undercut what I was doing. And I started to feel like, oh, this actually bothers you that I have a platform, that I'm starting to build a platform. And then I was only at like maybe about 5,000 followers at the time. Like this is rinky dink in terms of TikTok, right? Like that's not actually not a lot. And the around that time is when I started finding out about the Quest program, because like Adventism is very heavily anti-queer. They're one of the last sermons I saw from my dad, he was waving around a cosplay sword, talking about like it was basically being queer it's a mental disorder stemming from the sin of not controlling your feelings. Like that's, and I think he was also talking about furries at the time, but it was really funny because he was like there was queer stuff in there was allusions to furries in there. It was a whole weird thing. But of course I myself am queer, I'm bisexual, and the cosplay sword he was waving around was like a Lord of the Rings sword that his gay daughter had given him. But if you guys want to know where my flair comes from, yeah, that perform. My whole family is just out here swinging swords on a stage. It's fine. But Adventism is very heavy on this idea that essentially it's thought control. And one of the reasons I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of Disney when I was a kid is Disney teaches you to follow your heart, and the Bible says the heart is deceitful above all things. So the general consensus within, and I remember picking up an Adventist publication from about 2018 that lists it as a disorder. The DSM-5, like that, it got rid of being queer as a disorder a long time ago. There is no peer-reviewed scientific research to substantiate that. So to me, it is actually profoundly unprofessional and irresponsible for a church organization to consider being queer to be maladaptive, to be psychologically or physically maladaptive. The research does not substantiate that, and claiming faith does is superstition. That, and looking at someone's gender or sexuality through a lens of superstition, I will say with my full chest, is irresponsible. So as I'm deconstructing this, I find out Adventism had the Quest program, which is where some guy walked up to the Adventist conference and was like, I cured myself of being gay. Give me money and I will create a program for you to cure your other gay members. There was no ethics committee on this program. There was no prior testing of his theory. Like none of the professional ethical things you're supposed to do for a therapeutic program. And it turns out things happened in that program that included naked massages. So like, yeah, the Adventist church was like, yes, please fix our problem members. Yeah, it didn't go well at all. And so you do see like the conversion therapy stuff carrying through. And I started to be like worried. Like I'd seen my mom pass away in the way that she did. And at the time, like my anxiety started going through the roof. And I think that the person I was with recognized it. And so they started feeding into it. And they started saying things like, I'm the only thing standing between you and disappearing. Like they'll probably take your phone. Our families know people. I remember at one point because I talked about how when we were in Ontario still, I was like, I thought about just driving away. And he looked at me and he said, they would have caught you before you got far. And I was like, who's they? Excuse me, what? And so there are these allusions to family connections. There was just, and of course, like, I have no idea how real any of this is. I'm stuck in a pandemic, in quarantine, with somebody who's telling me that they're the only thing standing between me and disappearing. It felt so intense. I had no idea how real it could possibly be. I know the church that we've grown up in runs conversion therapy. So at the time, like, when I actually moved and took myself to a new location, I would lie there listening because I would catch it. Friends, I would see like cars from people that we knew outside the building and reporting back. Like, they would see me at the window. There was one time I was doing a live stream, I think for TikTok. Somebody took a picture of me doing a live stream at the window and sent it back to them. Like, I'm being reported back on. And so I was absolutely terrified at the time because I didn't know, because I'm alone in this building. So I don't know if I'm just going to like wake up being dragged out and gone. And so that's, at the time I started, social media didn't matter to me following wise until that point. And that's when I started genuinely trying to build a platform, because I was like, if I disappear, maybe somebody will notice. Maybe some lovely person who's been following me and likes my content will be like, hey, where did Rosie go? Whatever happened to her? And it was just like this little thing, like, if anything happens, I hope somebody actually maybe asks a question or something.
Yeah, that's terrifying. So was he also stalking you, or was it just people that you knew?
I'm not sure. I did notice that, like I said, weird stuff started to happen. And I noticed that anytime I would do something that definitively moved me farther away, within a week, it was almost like a punishment action would happen in retaliation. So I would post something on social media talking about freedom from purity culture, right? Like, my very first kind of like saucy photos on Instagram were around that time. And then all of a sudden on his social media, like a kind of like kinky bondage photo goes up on his Facebook story that looks like me. And all of a sudden a bunch of people are freaking out and they're asking, like, why is this photo on your story? And he calls me freaking out about it and essentially implying that one of my followers doesn't like him and has hacked his accounts and is posting erotic content on his page. And because of the work he does, that's putting him at risk. So he's at work. So I log into his social media and I look at the history of logins. Nobody else is logged in. So
he's just self-destructing and blaming you for it?
And that seemed to be the situation. I'm looking at this like, what is going on? Like, why? And that was what was so weird to me. Is like, if you actually talk to me very straight on, if we have a dialogue that is in good faith and we lay out what we want and all of this stuff, like, we're going to get to a good place. I love healthy interaction. I love setting good boundaries with each other. I love making sure everyone feels heard. So to have people interacting around me in such unhinged, confusing ways, it made no sense to me whatsoever. Because I was like, you don't need to do this. You can just talk to me and respect where I want to be.
Yeah. Your whole relationship with him and his family, start to finish, was just the definition of passive aggressive.
Yeah. Because like I said, I had a very straightforward conversation about what I wanted, had the agreement to it, and then got into it, and it was like a whole other experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you got out of that. That sounds insane.
Likewise. Likewise.
How
And
long has
same to
it
you.
been? Yeah, thanks. How long has it been since you felt like you could finally relax and no one's following you?
So I ended up separating from that situation entirely in August of 2020. And I was on edge for at least a good year and a half after that happened. Especially even like it literally just felt like it was little me up against this entire organization and up against all of these people, none of whom were listening to me, none of whom were valuing my boundaries and what I had to say. And so based on what happened to my mom and then how I was treated following and the things that I was said were like I was told would happen to me, I ended up in like a state of intense hypervigilance for at least a year and a half. It took and it lingers, especially the food insecurity, going hungry for that long. It impacts you on such a profound level. So it wasn't until I started accessing like more somatic therapies, DBT, like the stuff, not just talk therapy, but the stuff that works on your nervous system, that I started experiencing a more regulated time of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, man, what a ride. You've been through so much. And we covered a tiny part of your story, everything that you talked about on your interview. You've been through a lot. So amazing that you've come out on the other side. You're doing something that you love and you feel great about it. And you have a following now, a big community that loves and supports you too. So let's take one or two more questions before we sign off. Laura says, sorry about the loss of your mother.
Oh, thank you.
Any others? Have you written a book?
I would love to. I've been thinking about it for a very long time. It's a matter of having like the time and energy to like actually sit down, like, because I'm a full-time content creator / spice merchant. So I'm constantly live streaming, filming, posting all this stuff. So I would love, right? Yeah. Algorithms don't sleep.
Yes, exactly. You get it. Yeah, it's a never-ending grind, and I feel the same way. I'm like, man, if I just need like 3 days at a cabin by myself to just actually sit down and write it. No distractions,
Right?
no to-do lists, no even, I mean, I love taking care of our little one, but just not being a mom for a minute so I can just like, write everything down, get in that headspace, because you really have to be in the right zone to write that kind of stuff. So I hope you get around to it.
Yeah, but maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Does your dad know you are bi, and how does he react to that? Do you even have contact with your dad anymore?
No, I have been completely no contact since 2020. I have received letters that I've never responded to because especially like the very first one, it's stuff like you're making up narratives to suit you, or talking to me like I'm a rebellious 14-year-old and not a grown woman with extensive post-secondary education. So I ended up coming out of the closet through TikTok. I never had a conversation with them about it because like I saw the way that they treated my mom's own experience with queerness, which was to shut it down entirely, make it something that she needed to regulate and control. So basically my act of self-care was to never give them access to it. I have not allowed my family to interact with me about it. I've never allowed them to comment on it. The only interest I have in regards to that is if they end up being willing to talk to me about it and interact with me about it entirely outside of the Adventist theological perspective on it. There's it's either you drop the Adventist stuff or you don't get anything in regards to that commentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't blame you for that. Julie says, Rosie, you're a true warrior. Sorry you had to go through the rough, unnecessary times.
Yeah,
Susan,
it was not.
I'm so glad you got out. Keep
Me
up the great work
too.
you're doing and telling your
Aw.
story.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
Thank you, lady. Really appreciate your time today. This is my Sunday service.
Mm.
Preach.
Oh yeah, I thought it was ironic my episode was released on a Saturday.
I didn't even think about that. That's so funny.
Mm.
Katruna, hey, appreciate the C2C as guests from all walks of life. It really shows how similar they are. I know, every time, especially with this one and Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm like, Mormonism.
Mm.
It's like the same religion with a different name. It's crazy.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for coming back, Rosie, and chatting with us. I know we still had so much we
Mhm.
didn't even cover. Maybe another time.
Oh yeah, we didn't even get to cry nights.
Oh, we didn't get to cry night. So sorry, guys. Maybe we'll have to do it on another live. Let us know if you want to hear about cry nights. Yeah. Do you have any other? Tell everyone where they can find you and support you and follow you and all the things.
Yeah, you can find me across a variety of platforms. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. Part of the platform that I do is that I took the counseling and personal support work stuff and started doing very disability care oriented content, mental health, things like that. So if you're interested in accessing that, I post most of that on TikTok. The social media focused on deconstruction. If you go back in my content, a lot of that is more on TikTok. However, I find that most of where I talk about it is on Twitch. If you join me on my live streams, we end up talking quite extensively about religious trauma, mental health, gender and queer identity, things like that. Because I find it's so much that it is a lot easier for me to talk about it across a live stream. So if you find me on Twitch, I also have a Discord server where people can interact with me and ask questions there as well. So yeah, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff.
Okay. All those links should be in the description currently. And if you have not watched the full interview, go do that now. It's fantastic. And do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I'd honestly say that, like, with my experience with Adventism, it can be very frustrating where, like, as you're deconstructing and like you're looking at the people you left behind, the people who are supposed to support you and whatnot. My own experience with deconstruction happened because I got it. Nobody argued me out of it. Nobody held me accountable out of it. Nobody did it. This is problematic and you need to switch up kind of thing. What happened was I became disillusioned with it. It was the way that I describe it is never blessed. I was promised blessing, and instead of blessing, what I got was a whole lot of something else entirely that stressed out my nervous system. And I think, like, the important thing to remember is that, like, human brains are designed to protect themselves. We have ego defenses and all of this stuff. So typically people don't respond to being yelled at to be accountable, to stop being problematic. Like, your beliefs are a problem, so you're a problem. People don't really respond to that. The thing to remember is, like, what usually pulls us out of this is disillusionment. It's that sense of hollowness where what you've dedicated yourself to did not have the return that was promised. And so, like, it's important to remember that you can't force people to come out. You can't force people to love and care about you the way that would be ideal and actually, like, the right for interpersonal relationships. You can go forward. You can go forward yourself, focus on your own agency, your own healing, your own autonomy, and you don't have to go to war with anybody. You don't have to, like, you can grieve. You can't, if you feel angry, being angry is okay. But at the end of the day, like, they have their own agency, you have yours, and you are the expert in what you need and in what's best for you. So it's okay for you to just move forward, find therapy, find education, set your boundaries. Because at the end of the day, you taking care of you, your nervous system, your brain, your sense of self is what's most important.
Preach. No, I love that you said that, and all of it was amazing, and it's perfect because it actually reminded me next weekend in Utah, Lehi, Utah, I'm speaking at the Thrive event, and the topic that I chose is how do you get someone out of a cult? And so everything you just talked about is spot on. And so if you're in Utah and you want to go check it out, it's thethriveproject.com. I think all of the details are in one of my most recent reels on Instagram at Close to Consciousness, so you can find the details there. But yes, absolutely agree with what you said. It is nearly impossible to walk up to someone and be like, "You're in a cult, and here's why," and then they'd be like, "Okay, thanks for letting me know. Let's go get some ice cream." It just doesn't work that way.
No.
So yes, 100% agree. Focus on you. Focus on moving forward in your own life, and just focus on being kind and compassionate to those who may be still in, because you might be their lifeline. And the only reason they're going to know that is if you are kind and non-judgmental and you have that door open and available to them. So yes, thank you so much for joining us, Rosie. You're amazing.
Thank you.
I hope we can do it again soon. And
would love to.
For everyone listening, thank you for being here live. We so appreciate it when you jump on. Some people have asked for our live schedules. We truly don't have one. It's kind of on the fly, but we always announce it on Instagram an hour before, a couple hours before. So if you want to know when we're going live without the notification telling you going live right now, follow us on Instagram at Close to Consciousness and check out our stories. So until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well. Don't forget to like and subscribe all the YouTube things. Love you guys. Talk soon.